Furina's rerun is finally here. It's been a very long time since her last banner. The hype is naturally huge, but I want to back away from the hype and really break down whether you should pull her. While she is strong, in order to not waste your primos, there's some really important things you need to consider when it comes to her kit. There's also an incredibly important aspect of her that goes beyond her kit that will either make or break Furina, which I'll mention in the end, so stick around until then. But now, let's set the stage for her review with a quick rundown of her kit. So first up with Furina's skill, this is one of her bread and butter abilities. When used, 3 Hydro creatures will take the field and damage enemies. Now these creatures will not attack in unison. Actually, they're quite unique in that they have their own attack speed and deal different amounts of damage. This ability enables Furina to be a sub DPS or passive damage dealer, and a very good one at that since she can deal some very nice damage with her skill. This makes her appear quite similar to the other Hydro units in the game like Yelan and Xingqiu, but there's some massive differences in her skill that really make her apart from these two. A really nice one is that these little guys will attack on their own, so you don't have to perform any specific attacks like normal attacks as you would with Yelan and Xingqiu, making Furina applicable to really any DPS. But most notably, using these 3 guys will consume your team's HP. This is for sure appearing as a bad thing, but in combination with her burst, it's actually more than worth it. When cast, Furina will be able to give her team fanfare stacks, and to put it simply, these stacks will give your entire team elemental damage bonus. The max amount of stacks that she can produce at C0 is 300, which equates to 75% elemental damage bonus. This of course is huge and makes Furina's buffing capabilities unmatched, and yes, this is the max stacks, which is not always going to happen when you play her, but this is very achievable with team-based healers. And this brings us to the very first pro of Furina. She legitimately breaks the meta. With Furina, forget the tier list you have of characters, everyone now with Furina is massively better. Take for instance the team-based healers I just mentioned. So healers like Jean, Chi-Chi, and Mika, they were forgotten units that no one used and naturally everyone deemed them as weak. Yet now, because they're perfect healers to pair with Furina and enable Furina to build her fanfare stacks, they're now significantly better and highly sought after. But Furina's improvements don't just stop to healers, and as you can guess, with such a universal buff as elemental damage bonus, Furina buffs every unit and fits into probably hundreds of teams. If you want to raise the DPS of any meta unit, say like Maoika, Furina can absolutely do that. In the case you want to buff a non-meta DPS like I wanted to do for Jean, again Furina can do this and actually unbelievably so. Look at the numbers my Jean is hitting for. Furina can even buff Geo units, and this is something really crazy. Any of you OG players will remember that buffing Geo in the past was nearly impossible, but now with Furina this is no longer the case. She universally buffs all Geo units regardless of whether they scale on attack and defense, which this makes her the staple Geo buffer. So Furina quite literally breaks the meta. This is not an overstatement. She buffs every character in the game and makes everyone and every team much stronger. Her versatility is unmatched, as is her buffing potential, but especially if you pair Furina with a certain healer. For those of you that have Xilonen, them two make everyone even stronger than what I just mentioned. You thought 75% damage bonus was crazy? The Xilonen and Furina duo break the meta twice. It was already broken, it's broken again. Get this, Xilonen's healing can max Furina's fanfare stacks, but generally, she'll at least build most of her fanfare stacks. So for the sake of being safe, let's say Xilo builds 56% elemental damage bonus. But on top of this, Xilonen will shred the resistances of enemies, and she can shred a max of 36% elemental resistance. Xilonen's set will also be Force Intercity, which gives 40% elemental damage bonus to the elements used in Crystallize. In total, this duo gives you 96% damage bonus with a 36% shred to your team. And I get that this is 2 units you need to pull for, but this just showcases the downright brain dead buffing Furina can cause. They're easily able to double the DPS of your damage dealer, and remember that while these buffs are absolutely applied to your DPS, they're also applied to Furina. So Furina's own DPS is going to be really nice, and she serves as a very strong DPS in addition to a crazy buffer, both of which are things any team would want. Another sphere of buffing that occurs with Furina is through artifacts. Furina is gonna enable for further buffs through the use of a broken set Chaussee Hunter. Initially, it'll grant some extra normal and charge attack damage, but the real game changer is its 4-piece. When your character gains or loses HP, which Furina enables for, their crit rate will increase to a max of 36%. 36% is huge, and this makes the set the insane set it is, as with such a high crit rate buff, any DPS with Furina can have a very nice crit ratio where you pretty much just worry about building as much crit damage as possible. And best of all, beyond the 2-piece catering to many DPSs, Chaussee is applicable to virtually any DPS. Yes, not every DPS use their normals and charge attacks, but the high crit damage this set will enable for is gonna serve as a huge buff to a character's entire moveset, so even if they use their skill or burst, this set is still an exceptional set to use. Now, with all that I've said, this does make Furina appear as the perfect unit, but no unit in the game is perfect. There are some negatives that do come with Furina that can limit her performance. Two of them, which I'll get out of the way quickly, is her energy and her effect on teams. See, Furina spends a very short amount of time on the field, so she doesn't grab as many energy particles on field. In combination with her high burst cost, Furina does struggle with energy, and this is something you're definitely going to notice when playing with her, and you're going to have to solve. But something you're not exactly going to be able to solve is her second con, her effect on teams. Yes, her huge buffs are very nice, but they come at the cost of draining your team's HP constantly. Even with the healer, your team is not going to be at max health, and in tandem with fighting opponents and getting hit by them, it's sort of common to get one shot by them and die since your unit's health was already so low because of Furina. But now let's move over to a more serious negative of hers, and that's her Hydro application. Furina does not apply a lot of Hydro on enemies. She applies enough to get off reactions like Freeze and Taser, but if you're playing teams that want a lot of Hydro like Vaporize, you're going to struggle as her Hydro application is gonna be overpowered by your Pyro DPS, and she'll be the one vaping instead of them. As such, Furina is not all that reliable in vape, at least in certain vape teams. Say for instance, if you were planning to play Furina in a D-Luke vape team and you're just going to be using him normally, you're not going to be plunging, then yeah, and Furina is not exactly going to be the one for you. She's going to need another Hydro character to help her out with her Hydro application, and this doesn't work flawlessly, as you'll see in the next of Furina's negative. Say you want to run Furina in a D-Luke vape team, and this is pretty much the team you'd be running, but you may notice a problem with this team. It's Benny. Benny is a single target healer and the most broken of all healers, yet he's not the best with Furina since Furina wants team-based healers, and this is the negative I was referring to. Furina's healer options are restricted. As much as I'm glad that she uplifts Jean and all these other unused healers, Furina sort of brings down all these broken single unit healers since she doesn't really want to be played with them, and considering how great these healers are and how they're applicable to so many units, fitting Furina with certain units that want healers like Benny can be a headache. Now, it's vital that I mention that single unit healers are absolutely playable with Furina. They're still going to build fanfare stacks, and this is thanks to Furina's passive talent that helps with such healers. Her bursts increase to healing bonus, and if you build these healers as dedicated healers where you give them healing sets, they do perform better. Nevertheless, they're still going to build less stacks and build stacks slower. So sure, you can play Furina with popular healers like Benny, but it's certainly not a perfect pairing. Okay, now let's discuss the most important thing you need to consider if you're pulling for Furina. Her longevity. Furina has been out for about a year. She's fared amazingly in the Fontaine meta, and even now with half of the Natlan arc over, she's still number 1. However, the new upcoming region, as crazy as it is to say, is pretty much just around the corner. Not that long from now, we're going to be heading over to Snezhnaya, and with it comes a new meta and units that could very well replace Furina. And I get this does sound crazy since how are you going to replace someone that gives a 75% damage bonus? But characters are constantly dropping and rising in the meta, and broken additions are always being added to the game. A prime example is Furina herself. 75% elemental damage bonus is huge, but you can also see this with Force Ender City. This one set alone gives your team a 40% damage increase to 2 elements, which is actually pretty similar to Furina's role. So with the looming threat of being replaced by a character, or heck, even an artifact set, which she probably won't get replaced by an artifact set, but you know what I mean, this begs the question if Furina is still worth it. To be honest, after judging all scenarios, in my opinion, it's still a strong yes. Even for the latter half of Natland, there's no one replacing her or taking Furina's spot. Her buffs are still wanted in every team, and indeed, there's still units meant for her like Shilonen, so Furina is not going anywhere in Natland. But for Snezhnaya, this is more tough. All we can do is speculate on the past, but even then, I still think Furina fares well. There may very well be a support character that buffs better than Furina, but it's possible that instead of replacing Furina, she could be played next to Furina. That unit may have dual strength similar to how Furina does. Furina is not just used for her buffing, she's also used for her personal damage. Likewise, the character that may replace Furina could buff like her, but they may also have another strength that puts them next to Furina instead of taking her place. But say this is too optimistic. Say I'm blinded from my love for Furina and Furina is getting replaced in the next region. In the event that this actually does happen, still I think Furina will be worthwhile to pull. She fits into all these teams and buffs this whole set of team setups. She's still going to be great with Novelette and great for all these other DPSs, so if anything you can have this new broken support on one team with all the new characters playing by the new meta, and you can have Furina in the other team in the Abyss, where you play her with a Fontaine unit or all these other units she massively buffs. Thus Furina is still great even if she's replaced. Well everyone, this is my review of Furina. I hope you guys enjoyed it and helped you figure out whether you should get her. Please consider liking and subscribing, and thanks for watching.